It was the middle of the second week after Henley. That is how my friend Cluer would fix the date, I'm sure. I'm not a boating man myself, so perhaps I ought to explain how I came to be in solitary possession of a Randon that Wednesday in the latter part of July. Cluer wanted it down at Datchet on the Saturday following and was too busy to bring it down himself. Would I go to Henley and fetch it for him? I had nothing to do, so Cluer said. I might take all week over it if I choose, so long as I reached Datchet by Friday night. I decided that I ought to be able to manage the distance and somewhat less than that, and in fact I reached Monkey Island by the middle of the second day of my blistering journey. The sun had blazed upon me for a day and a half, and I had thoroughly enjoyed it, and had not broken anything as yet or scraped the varnish off the Randon very much either, which I consider to my credit, taking into account the fact that I had been absolutely unguided in every sort of way, and had not yet made up my mind whether I ought to sit on the stroke seat or the middle one. It did not occur to me to ask Cluer about this previously, and I did not like to ask anyone else. Monkey Island did not attract me. It had an off-dayish and lonesome look, and though I like solitude in places which are usually thronged is oppressive. I thought I should prefer going on a bit and eating my own cold lamb and salad out of my own hamper. But I bought some bread and a couple of bottles of ginger beer and paid for the bottles for the reasons which are unanswerable. Lower down, however, the banks became comparatively uninteresting. On the towpath side, there was the towpath with fields beyond dusty and uninviting, and on the other more fields, apparently private property, which I was unwilling to desecrate. I selected the towpath side after some deliberation, for like the sun, even in the middle of the blazing July day, I have noticed that this liking is common among Londoners. I landed my hamper with great precaution, drew the Randon half out of the water with all the care and conscientiousness which my inexperience and the respect I bore toward it and Cluer demanded, and then spread a napkin on the grass and put my lamb on a plate in the middle and the salad on another side of the plate, with the bread and the glass and the knife and the fork at proportionate distances. Then I put all the paper back into the hamper. I dislike paper around at a picnic. Dipped my handkerchief in the water and wrapped it around one of the ginger beer bottles to keep it cool, and regarded everything with calm satisfaction. As I said, I am fond of solitude and sun, and I was having as much of both as possible to a man on the River Thames. So I sat down and said what I hope was an appropriate grace, remembering what Elia has written on the subject, and paused to give a long, round look before I began. I never ate any of that lunch. For on the towpath, coming towards me, my eyes caught a vision of a blue skirt, surmounted by an enormous sheaf of red poppies, clasped in front of two coarsely gloved hands. Over the poppies, I had a glimpse of a broad-brimmed straw hat, but they had hid the face beneath, and their possessor had almost passed me before her eyes met mine. I do not know whether I ever want to see that face again. Cluer says I do, and as it was the most remarkable, beautiful face I have ever seen. I suppose he's right, but I could argue to the contrary. The face was hot and flushed, and as she turned it towards me, I noticed 2 lines of perspiration trickling down from her temples to her cheeks. The beads had also gathered on her upper lip, which was prettily parted from the lower by the strain of her awkward burden. She did not see my admiration for a moment, and then her eyes flashed down upon mine, calm and gray and unfathomable, and mine dropped onto the cold lamb directly, and then rose again to her dusty shoes. I was sitting on the grass just below the towpath. She passed me and went on for 10 or 15 yards and then paused. She seemed to be deliberating. Then she came back and threw the bundle of poppies down beside me as I rose. My hat was in the boat, so all I could do was to stand up. She did not speak at once, but regarded my lunch and then myself. The combination apparently pleased her. At all events, I do not think her satisfaction was attributable to the cold lamb alone, and Kluwer allows that I am not a vain man, especially when in the neighborhood of the river. I am so hot and hungry, she said quietly, without a trace of affection or confusion. What will you do? I am usually struck, speechless or on emergencies, but something about this girl inspired me with unwonted confidence. In spite of her disarray, she seemed so self-possessed and unembarrassed that I could not feel otherwise myself. You need not remain hungry for long, I replied. Everything I've got is at your service. This was comprehensive, but strictly true, I can swear. What a strange place you have chosen, she said, disregarding my offer. Well, perhaps it is, said I, but hardly unfortunate. I added, with a readiness that amazed myself, and looked up at her face again to find the gray, great eyes fixed upon me intently, reading me through. She did not smile. She bowed slightly and sedately in acknowledgement. Thank you, she said. There is a little shade the other side of the bank in the field. Will you carry it over there for me? Certainly. The change took about 3 minutes, during which she sat on the edge of the randan and fanned herself with her handkerchief. When I came and told her it was ready at last, I found her looking at the book I had brought with me. It makes an ordinary man blush to be discovered with a book of poetry in his possession. I blushed and hoped the sunburn would hide it. You have been reading Lady Geraldine's Courtship, she said. My name is Geraldine. My presence of mind began to fail me. I always liked that piece so much, she added. Then she came and sat down on the bank in front of the cold lamb and looked at it. There does not seem to be very much of it, she said, and the first smile she had given me broke around her mouth. I can eat all that myself, and why not, I answered. What will you do? Oh, there is bread and some lettuce, and that is quite enough. Besides, I can go to the Shirley and lunch out there. I would have gone on there and not troubled your generosity, but I have only 2 pence in my pocket, she said, and I should have spent a penny in the crossing. Please don't say troubled my generosity, I said. No, I don't mean to, she said quickly. I think I would have stopped anyhow for your lunch. Looked very tempting, and it is a mile or more to the Shirley. You see, I crossed at Monkey Island and have been out in the fields gathering poppies, hoping to recross somewhere here, and it got later than I had thought. I have 2 miles to walk on the other side. You must allow me to ferry you afterwards, I said. Thank you. As she ate up my lunch and I had the opportunity of looking at her more closely, she recalled to my mind Tennyson Maud's, with her full underlip and the least little delicate aquiline curve in a sensitive nose. She was dressed in the plain blue skirt and a full white blouse tied at the waist with a band of broad ribbon. She was tall, and her figure was beautiful as her face, and the stately set of her head and the gracefulness of her slender neck most admirable. I am certain she wore no stays. I could not understand at all who she might be. Her hands bellied the notion that she was an artist's model, as I, if half inclined to think, her at first so fine and delicate were they. I had expected to be disappointed there, but I had been prejudiced before, perhaps by the coarse garden gloves. The conclusion that I came to was that being a lady in the most dignified sense of the word, she had been enabled to perceive some traits of the gentleman about myself, and having need of me, had seen no reason to conceal the fact. And, as that was a very comfortable conclusion to arrive at, I made no attempt to construct another theory, but rested satisfied with the good fortune that had been following me, and the absence of Mrs. Grundy, sensible old person though I am willing to admit her to be. After a while, I opened the bottle of ginger beer and poured the contents onto the tumbler for her. I will not be responsible for it, I laughed. She put back the lock of brown hair that was still moist with the dew of her forehead with her left hand and took the tumbler in her right, and answered, laughing too, as she gracefully glanced at me. I must risk it. I am too hot to consider possible effects. She drank it off daintily in 2 or 3 gulps, and relieved me by saying that it was almost as good as my cold lamb. She seemed to have a most excellent appetite indeed, and I expected from her healthy appearance, and I watched her with the greatest delight. You like Mrs. Browning, then? She asked suddenly. Indeed I do, said I. And Lady Geraldine's courtships particularly? Particularly. That is a favorite with most people. It is so captivatingly sentimental and romantic that we can overlook the improbability of the story. What improbability? I admit I form opinions on grounds which seem insufficient when demanded of me with such suddenness. I hesitated. Perhaps you consider Lord Walter's wife improbable? She went on. I had no hesitation now. Yes. Her eyes dwelt on mine a moment. Which is improbable, the lady or the man? The lady, I answered. I have never seen such a dignity of merriment as her eyes displayed at my answer. You are hard upon him, she said, and perhaps my implication still harder upon her. No, that's not fair. But you must believe in Lord Walter's wife in future, or at least only disbelieve in the man. I could not quite follow her. She had thought too fast for me, but I remembered what she had said afterwards and thought over it, and I fancy that I have appreciated what she meant. At any rate, I have certainly believed in the lady. Cluer laughed when I told him so once, not an unkind laugh. Cluer's laughter is never unkind. She had finished her lunch, my lunch, and sat for a little while looking across the fields. I do not think she minded my looking at her. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that it was out of consideration for me and as a sort of recompense that she stayed and allowed me to do so. But she turned her head towards me presently and said, I think I must ask you to take me over now. So I fetched my hamper and packed my things, gathered up her poppies, and put them into the bows of the randon, and then, with an effort which disposed me to estimate the substance of the tains, since I had landed at least a foot, forced the boat out on the water and drew it in sideways. My Lady Geraldine stepped in lightly and sat down on the cushions. I decided that the stroke seat was the right place for me after all. I think I see a road coming down to the river, I said, pointing 50 yards downstream to the right bank. Shall I land you there? If you please. I proceeded to scull her along very carefully. I was anxious not to make an exhibition of myself, and my rowing is apt to splash sometimes. In 5 minutes, I had put her ashore without disaster. I bound up the sheaf of poppies with the string from my hamper, having first collected them out of the bows. It was during this collection that she remarked that I need not be so careful over 1 or 2, and a slight smile flickered round her mouth as she said so. I have those old poppies still, though I am not sure whether I received express permission to keep them. She put the bundle under her left arm, right hand into her pocket, and produced a penny. My fare, she said, holding it out into the palm of her glove. I hesitated a moment. I did not see why she should be particular about paying for her ferrying over in a coin of the realm, considering that she had made no such return for her lunch. However, I recollected that my cold lamb was worth more than the 2 pence she possessed, and was glad of it, too, so I took the penny. I have that penny also still. As for the rest, she said, I can only thank you, and the best way to thank you is to take your kindness as a matter of course, isn't it? This was the way of looking at the matter which took my fancy. It was so entirely right and kind and womanly. Why do not more women treat us so? I bowed my assent. I had nothing to say. Perhaps I looked rather downcast at parting. If I did look that what I felt, she consoled me with another compliment. And I think, she added, that in spite of my telling you that I have 2 miles to walk, you will not offer to carry my poppies for me? Not a suspicion of mockery came into her eyes as she said this. They were perfectly steady, and the words and her manner of speaking them conveyed such an expression of confidence in my readiness to appreciate and acknowledge the exact point at which my services ceased to be requisite, that I could only bow my assent to do this also. My silent acquiescence seemed to please her. She drew off her right glove, though with some difficulty, for the poppies hampered her, and her hand out to me. Then goodbye, she said. Our meeting had been so unconventional altogether that I felt I dared safely brave conventionality now without running the risk of being misunderstood. The old courtly act seemed too appropriate to the occasion to be looked upon as liberty. I took the tips of her fingers and bent my head down and kissed them. I gave her time to take them away, but she did not do so. On the contrary, she perceived my intention at once and slightly raised them to meet me as I bent. Then she drew back and, catching the skirt of her dress with the fingers I had just released, made me the most profound and wondrous courtesy. And considering the bundle of poppies, I think you will allow that she must have been a graceful woman not to have looked the least trifle awkward over the proceeding. Her eyes just glanced again at mine as she rose, and then she turned and walked away. I did not stay to watch her to the bend of the road. I had received my dismissal, but tumbled back into the veranda and rode off violently downstream. I ran into the bank 3 times before I reached Surly. I think, on the whole, that was excusable. And at Surly, I had a 4 o'clock lunch, which restored me to my ordinary senses. Cluer thanked me for bringing his boat down, and I thanked Cluer for allowing me to do so. And, more besides, I consider myself largely indebted to Cluer. And as for her, it does a man good in these days to be trusted by a woman after such a fashion, and that at a glance. This has been A Matter of Course, author Temple Bar, published in Short Stories, a magazine of fact and fiction, Volume 13, 1893. Narrated by Conan Stewart for Tales Reawakened on YouTube.